When you start to shoot film and process your own film and work in the darkroom, you generally come to the conclusion, I need a bigger negative. Now, you probably started off with 35 mil, and 35 mil is wonderful, and 35 mil has its place, but there's an advantage to shooting with 120. Let me show you the Hasselblad system that I've built in the last few months. My name is Rob Skeoch. I'm a career photographer. I've shot a lot of film over the years, and I've shot a lot of digital as well. And part of shooting film is the realization that, oh, I wish I had a bigger negative in the darkroom. Or when we were shooting transparencies or slides, whatever you want to call them, a bigger slide. When film ruled, a lot of people were shooting 2.25 because magazines, publications, they wanted that bigger transparency. You could shoot it on 35 mil. A lot of people just shot 35 mil. I understand it. But at some point, there's a desire to shoot with a larger format, medium format. Now, I've shot with most of the medium format systems because I've been around a long time. So I shot with a Mamiya 645, a Mamiya RB. I shot Pentax 6.7 at a studio I worked at. I shot Pentax 645. I shot the autofocus Pentax 645. I've had a Rollei T. I've had a Rollei GX. I currently have a Rollei 135, an FT it's called. And of course, there's Hasselblad. So I've shot with Hasselblad a lot. My background with film was sports photography. Now, why would you shoot with a Hasselblad for sports photography? Well, we did. We shot NBA and a bit of NHL, but mostly NBA. You used remote cameras that were mounted in the ceiling or behind the basket or remote somewhere, and you used a Hasselblad for that. Now, the lenses are slow, but we were connected to the strobes in the ceiling. So I know it's a little bit confusing and maybe you're not really familiar with this, but in the ceiling at an NBA game or an NHL game, there are strobes up in the roof that you can rent. Now, 20 years ago, when I used to shoot NBA on film, those strobes were $400 a game. So you would rent them from the facility, and there were their lights. You just plugged in and you set up your remotes, and then you had a camera in your lap, which was probably 35 mil. So at that time, I had a lot of Hasselblad gear because it was the Hasselblad with the motor built on that you could fire remotely, and it would fire the camera, fire the strobes, and it all worked together. And you could actually sync it all together so that multiple cameras fired at the same instant and use the same strobes all at the same instance. So after I kind of left Sony, I thought, I'm retired. I'm going to, get rid of some of my camera equipment. At that point, I had Pentax 645. I sold that all off, and I only had the Rollei for 120 film, and I love the Rollei. But as I started to get back into film, I thought, you know what? I'm going to have to go back to Hasselblad system. So I had sold my Hasselblad system off years ago. I actually traded it to buy some 8x10 gear because I just wasn't using it enough. When I started at Sony, so I was a national manager for Sony North America in the imaging division, and I just wasn't shooting film. Like, obviously, we were totally digital, and you just didn't have a lot of use for a Hasselblad system. So I sold it all off. That was a mistake. I had a 40 mil lens that I bought new, should never have sold that. I had a 250 that I bought new, should never have sold it. I had a lot of backs, should never have sold them. So a mistake, I agree, it was a mistake. I've made so many mistakes over the years that it's, we don't want to keep track. But I have gone back to buying the Hasselblad system. Now, in the summer, last summer, so 6 months ago or so, I decided I'm going to rebuy Hasselblad. I was having problems with my Rollei. It was in the shop. It was taking a long time to get fixed. I decided to rebuy Hasselblad. Now, the advantage I had this time around was I already knew the system, and I basically already knew exactly what I wanted. Usually when you build a system, you make some mistakes. And you buy a lens or something, that's just not the right lens, or, like for example, with Leica, I have two 35 mil lenses. I have two 50s. Were they mistakes? Well, you could argue that they're not mistakes. The lenses are slightly different, but do you really need a 35 1.4 and a 35 f2? Yeah, the 35 f2 is smaller, probably sharper, but I mean, how many lenses do you need? So you're trying to eliminate the mistakes. So at the end of the summer, I decided I'm going to come up with the perfect Hasselblad system, and I'm just going to buy it. And I'm going to buy the different parts whenever I see them on eBay, or if a friend is selling something, I'm going to jump on it. I kind of had a list of what I wanted. I was familiar enough with the system to know what I was looking for. Now, not the first thing I bought, because the first thing I bought was actually a lens, which is weird because I didn't have a camera. But one of the first things I bought was the camera. So this is what I would call my prime camera. This is the Hasselblad 555. Now, years ago, when I had Hasselblad the first time, I had the Hasselblad 553. So this is the update version of that camera. Hasselblad came out with a motorized camera in, like, it was the 500 EL. That was like 1965 to 1970. Then they updated it to ELM, and then they updated it to the ELX, which now we're kind of like 1988. Now the ELX used a NiCad rechargeable battery, and people didn't like that. And I had cameras like that, and you could buy a third-party adapter that would allow it to use a 9-volt battery. So that was fine with the ELX. But they came up with the 553 ELX, which is what I had previously. And then in 1998, till around 2006, the camera was the 555. So that's what I bought this time. This was the last generation of the motorized Hasselblad film cameras in the 500 series. It's the 555, and this is my primary #1 camera. Now, I see myself as a portrait photographer, not a landscape photographer primary, although I seem to be talking and showing mostly landscape work, but I see myself as a portrait photographer, and the 555 is the perfect camera for that. So this is the 555. Now, I like the black version. As I said, I wasn't new to Hasselblad. I already been through this before. I like the black version. I don't recommend the black version. The black version shows the scratches more. Like with a little bit of work, you're going to have scratches on this black area of the camera. But if this was a chrome camera, it would look pristine. So I recommend the chrome version, but it's the 555. This is really the pinnacle of Hasselblad, in my opinion. And my opinion is always wrong. But anyways, this is the Hasselblad 555. This is the primary camera that I shoot with. Runs on AA batteries, has all the latest features that they had before the whole line kind of ended. So, wonderful camera. Now, I use it with a chimney finder. So the chimney finder, it doesn't actually magnify, I don't even think, as much as the regular flip-up waist level finder, but it is easier to use. You can adjust it to your eye, the diopter is built in, and this is what I like, is this chimney finder. It's not super popular, and it's not a prism. The advantage of a prism is, of course, it's better for shooting, eye level with the camera. The disadvantage of the prism is that it's harder to use on a tripod. And then that's the 90-degree prism. And there's also a 45-degree prism. I've had that in the past. That was convenient too. But I actually like this chimney finder. So this is what I have. And the other thing I'm showing here is I've got this film black. So the film black, this was the last version before it kind of all fell apart. Now, if you're buying used, you've got to be careful that it's a 12 film back. You will see 24 film backs very inexpensive, or maybe in pristine shape, and you think, oh, that's a 24 back. That'll be fantastic. Don't buy it. I don't know of any films currently available in 220. So there's no reason to get an A24 back or an A32 back, because you won't be able to buy any film. Now, maybe someone's going to reintroduce the film in a 220, but we've been waiting for that for years. I don't think it's going to happen. So, and it's hard to process the 220 because it's so long and so thin. It's hard to get it on a roll, on a reel, if you're processing it yourself. So what you're going to want to buy is, in my view, an A55 camera. I like the chimney finder, and an A12 back. This gives you 12 exposures on a roll. This was the latest version. It has the dark slide holder. Now, you see third-party dark slide holders that have been kind of glued on backs, but this is the actual built-on from Hasselblad. I think this is version 4 or version 5 of the backs. They're more expensive. Again, this one is black. It would be less expensive and more available if it was a chrome one. But this is the Hasselblad 555. This is the pinnacle of Hasselblad photography, in my opinion. Now, as weird as it is, as I said, I had the system in my mind before I started to purchase. And although I love the 555, it is a little bit heavy and it relies on batteries. So it is possible that you'd be out in the middle of nowhere and your batteries die. So it doesn't take a lot to bring extra batteries, but it gets cold, batteries die. So there is an advantage to having a second camera. We would call it a backup. And this is my backup. So this is the Hasselblad 503 CXI. So, of course, in the early days of Hasselblad, there was the 500C, and then the classic one is the 500CM, and then they came out with, like maybe 94, they came out with a 501C and a 501CM, so that was kind of like 97 to 2005, and then they switched from the 501 series to the 503 series, so there was a 503CX. So now we're kind of like 94, and then in 94, this was available for a couple of years. It was the 503 CXI. So it does have a couple of advantages. The main advantage to me, though, because most of those advantages are related to TTL flash, the real advantage to me is it's just not that old. It's newer. So this is built between 94 and 96. After that, they came out with the 503CW, which would allow a motor drive on it. I never had one of those. But this is the 503CXI, again, a black version. I wouldn't, maybe this one only came in black. I can't remember. But the 503CXI. Now, this is a wonderful backup camera. Now, it could be your main camera if you only had one camera. But if you're planning a bigger trip, you're going to want a backup camera. And it's not that big if you don't have a back on it, you don't have a lens on it, and you have the regular prism or the regular pop-up finder. This is what I use as my backup. So if you're going to get two cameras, I would get, as I said, the 555. That's the main camera. And something, maybe the 503 CXI. I like it, but there are cheaper versions, earlier versions. I'm just always wary. I'm not a collector. I'm using these. I'm going to go on a portrait shoot. I can't have stuff not working, so I don't want to go get something that's 50 years old. I mean, this is already 30 years old. You know what I mean? So how much, and they're hard to get service. How old can you go? Anyways, this is the 503 CXI. This is my backup camera. It's wonderful. It's a great backup. Now, when it came out with a better screen. The person I bought this off of kept the better screen and sold me, and I knew it, but anyways, it's a backup. They sold me with a less expensive screen that's not quite as bright and not quite as great. But anyways, this is the 503 CXI. This is a wonderful product too. So again, as I said, when I built this system, I knew from the beginning what I wanted to end up with at the end. And I didn't buy everything in this order, but as I go through what's in my bag, these are the things that I bring with me on a shoot. Now, this is the best lens to buy first. This is the Hasselblad 120. They call it a macro. This happens to be the CFI version, which again is the latest version before the whole thing fell apart. The advantage of buying the latest one is it's just less likely to need service. There's a lot of these out there, 120s. It's been a lens in the system for decades and decades. So the fact that it's a macro allows you to focus a little bit closer. It's not true macro. It's not like macro mushrooms. Like, it's just closer focus, really. But the 120 is a great place to start. If you were going to buy one lens first, I would recommend that you get the Hasselblad 120. As I said, it's a macro. This is a great place to start. This one, it happens to be the CFI version, which was the latest version, but there were, many, many earlier versions that are equally as nice. Now this is the second lens I bought. This is the Hasselblad 180. Now, when I had Hasselblad years ago, I didn't have a 180. I had a 250, and they made a weird 160 called a CB. I think it was like a budget lens. I bought it new, and I hated it. I never liked it. My friend had a 150, which was kind of the standard, and maybe that was a better lens. But anyways, I always liked the 180, but I never had one previously. It's a wonderful portrait lens. And as I say, I'm generally consider myself a portrait photographer. So the 180, this is the latest version, the last version before it all went south. And people just love this lens. If people talk about their favorite Hasselblad lens, they probably say their favorite is the 150 because they haven't shot with the 180. But if you have a 180, you probably say the 180 is your favorite lens. Now, the 120 macro is more useful, but the 180 is everybody's favorite. So I'm just saying. So weirdly, the next lens that I find the most useful is actually the 250. So I have a 120, a 180, and a 250. Now the 250 was a lens that I previously had that I had bought new when I shot basketball. So the 250 was that kind of camera, a remote camera to the side, shooting the basket from the side. And I always loved the 250. It was great for portraits. It doesn't have super close focus, so you probably have to use an extension tube. I'll talk about that in a second. But the 250 is a great length. Now, would I go longer than 250? Well, you could use a 2 times teleconverter. That would be something. Or they make a 350. At this point, those lenses are getting heavy. And all of this is in my bag. So how much can you carry? How often are you going to use a 350? They actually make 2 versions of it. They make one with better glass. That would be a $5,000 lens used. So I'm not going to buy that. And I'm not even going to buy a 350 at all because this 250 is basically what I need at the long end. Again, this is a nice lens. It's part of a system. Now, you wouldn't, if you only had one lens, I don't think the 250 is the way to go, but this is a wonderful lens. Now, the interesting thing with these 3 lenses is they all use the B60 filter. So they're all the same filter size. Now, you can buy Hasselblad B60 filters. They're very hard to find. They're overpriced. You're not going to get exactly what you want. So what I bought was like a $15 adapter to go from the Hasselblad B60 to 67 millimeters because I already had some 67 millimeter filters. So this was kind of a mistake that I made, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I go from the B60 to the 67. And the filters that I use, and these are what's in my bag. Of course, my favorite one is the orange. These are B plus W. Any orange filter will do, but this is a B plus W 67 filter. So I use this a lot. The next one that I use is the B plus W yellow, which is called an 022. So as you can see here, it's a yellow filter. And it will work again with that adapter. That's the yellow. And then I've got a red. So this is the red filter from B plus W. It's called an 090. Sucks up 3 stops worth of light. Works on all 3 of these lenses with the adapter. And the only other filter that I have in this size is a B plus W 092, which is a weird infrared filter. So if I'm shooting infrared film, I use the 092 filter. It's almost black. It's like 5 stops of light. You kind of have to bracket. It's a bit of an experiment all the time. But with the infrared film and this 092, you get that cool infrared effect. Now, these are all 67 filter sizes because I have an adapter that is B60 to 67, if that makes sense. So I have 4 lenses altogether, and this is the final lens that I bought. This is the 50 millimeter, so it's a bit of a wide angle. Let's say it's like a 28 millimeter. Again, this is the CFI version, which is an advantage because it has 2 focus. So you do a rough focus and then you adapt it so that it moves some of the elements around so that they're sharper, and then you refocus. So you might have it set for infinity, but if you're doing closer work than that, you kind of look and you say, okay, I'm 4 meters, or I'm 1 meter away from let's say I'm 1 meter away. You would adjust this to the 1 meter area, and then focus, and it will be just critically sharper. It moves some of the elements. So that was an advantage. This is, as I said, the CFI version. That was the latest version. But that two focus idea was on the previous edition as well. So once they did that, they put those two focus ideas in. It was a great upgrade. It's much sharper than the regular old 50s. And not that sharpness is everything, but you want to sharpen the corners. You want it sharp anyways. So this was a great step up over the older version, just because it has that floating element that you can focus with the two focus ideas. So this is the 50 millimeter. Now, I did make a mistake because I didn't do my research properly. When I bought the 50, like, I love the lens. However, it's not a B60 bayonet 60 filter size. It's a B70. Wait a minute, B70. Well, that's not any good. I just bought all those, like, I bought an adapter B60 to 67, and now the filters are too small. These 67s are too small for this. So I had to buy another ring, which the ring wasn't really expensive. This is the final piece that I added to the kit, actually. So this is a B7 to 77 filter adapter. So now my mistake was, when I bought the B60 adapter, I should have went B60 to 77, not 67, because now I have to carry two sets of filters with me. So in 77, I've got the orange, my favorite filter. I've got the yellow. Again, now I've got, like, I'm carrying two yellows. That's the B plus W. I'm carrying two reds because I've got the 77 and the 67. I already had a green filter in 77, so I can use that now on the 50, only on the 50 mil lens. And I happen to have a circular polarizer, so I couldn't use a polarizer with this lens because I already had this. I wouldn't buy one now if I didn't already have it, but I already had it for years. So I've got a polarizer, a green, a red, a yellow, and orange. What I don't have for this, and it's too bad because it would be the lens you probably want to use the most, is I don't have the infrared filter. So if I'm shooting infrared film, I'm just going to make it up and use the red as compared to the true infrared 092. So that was a mistake. I should have bought the adapter and just had this set of filters. These filters are expensive. I mean, you're buying them used, they're still $100 each used. New, they're ridiculous. Now, and again, you could buy Hasselblad filters, but they'd be impossible to find and they'd be ridiculously expensive and you wouldn't really get exactly what you wanted. So I use an adapter ring and I carry two sets of filters in my bag. Now, what other things are in the bag? Well, I've got a hood that I never use, but it works on the 3 telephoto lenses. So I've got a hood. It came with one of the lenses, so I have it. I don't really use it because it doesn't work with the filters on the adapter, so I have a hood. In total, I have 3 different backs. So I've got the one back, it's loaded with Delta 100. I have the identical other back. This is, again, an A12, I think it's version 4, has the holder on the back. And with this, I have it loaded with Ilford Pan F50. It's not a film I'm going to continue to use, but I've got a dozen rolls or so to shoot off. So I've got some 50 in this one. And this back, now this is maybe version 3, so it doesn't have the dark slide holder on the back, as you can see here. And so this would be a little bit older, and it was $200 cheaper probably. So the advantage of the version 3 is it's cheaper. This one's very clean. Again, these are black. It would be easier to find and cheaper in chrome, but I like the black. There's no reason to buy the black, but I like the black. Now, with this one, I didn't mind buying a cheaper one because I'm not going to use this back that often. It's loaded with Rolly infrared film. Now, I don't always use the Rolly infrared. Sometimes I use like Ilford SFX 200, but I'm kind of settling on this Rolly film. And so I've got a back dedicated just to the Rolly film. And I didn't mind buying a cheaper back because how much infrared am I really going to shoot? Now, weirdly, before I started buying the Hasselblad gear, I had a Leica M6 that I just shot infrared with. So I had basically a Leica system, and I was, shooting some infrared. So I had a Leica M6 that I just used for infrared. Isn't that ridiculous? Anyways, I sold that off. And now I just shoot infrared with the 120. Now, the only other two pieces of Hasselblad gear I have are the extension tubes. So the lenses don't focus super close. And if you want to get closer, even though the one is called a macro, it's not super close. So I use these extension tubes. You would probably even use them with the 180 if you were doing portraits, because it doesn't focus close enough. They never focus close enough. So I do have two extension tubes. I don't actually keep them in the bag, because if I was doing a portrait, I would bring them. But if I'm off doing landscape stuff or a mountain and I'm hiking, I just don't need more stuff to carry. So I have two extension tubes. They're fantastic. I generally know when I'm going to shoot macro, so I just have them at home. So that's it for the Hasselblad part in the bag. I do have a few other things. I'll just go over those quickly. This is a Minolta Spotmeter F. This came out, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever. It reads flash and it reads ambient light. Now, when this came out, when this was current and we were shooting film every day, this was probably, for what I made, this would be like 2 weeks total wage to buy this new. Super accurate. It was these Minolta meters were the first time that meters weren't just sort of telling you if the sun was out or not. They were super accurate to the 10th of a stop, and the spot meter, it could do multiple readings, average them together. It could do a highlight reading. It could do a shadow reading, and it's a wonderful product. So I use the Minolta F spot meter. This is an amazing meter. You're going to buy them used now. They're probably still expensive, but I've had this for a long, long time. And the other meter that I use, this is an incident reflective meter, so you can do it incident or reflective. There's probably overpriced attachments that you can get on it. This is a Sekonic Lightmaster Pro L47 SUR. I've had a couple different Sekonic meters. They're fantastic, and there's no reason not to buy this one. There's not as many options for light meters now as there was decades ago, because people don't buy them, so why would they make them? But this one works with like Pocket Wizard. You can fire your Pocket Wizards, and it's integrated. It's a modern meter. So this has been very useful. I've had this probably 10 years, maybe a little bit less, but maybe even, maybe around 10 years. This is a great meter, and for incident and reflective. I would suggest you get a spot meter, but you're probably going to need an incident meter as well. Again, it's a lot of kit. I understand it, but we're trying to shoot at a high level, and these are just the tools. Now, just rounding out the kit, when I shot with Ebony 8x10 years ago, I found that the Ebony cable releases were as good as the best and better than the rest. Anyways, Linhof makes a good one too. It's hard to find a good cable release. No one makes them. They're all kind of like junk. Anyways, I happen to have two of these Ebony ones. I just keep them both in the bag. You wouldn't need two, obviously, but what am I going to do? Just keep this in a box at the house? I might as well just throw it in the bag. So I have cable releases. Now, it doesn't work on the motorized camera. It only works on the backup camera, because the motorized one doesn't have a regular cable release socket. You fire it a different way. And then I have this giant washer, which I only keep because it's light and it's strong and it's better. I don't always have a quarter. I don't always have $1. So I can't always do my tripod thread on the bottom of the camera or tighten it up. So I keep this little washer in the case. That's been useful a lot of times. So just a couple other little things. I've obviously got a notebook. I keep that in there with a couple of pens. This is the film that I keep in. So the backs are already loaded. They've got Rolly infrared, but I carry 2 extra spare rolls. I've got Pan F in one of the backs, but I've got 3 extra rolls of that. And the main film that I use is the Ilford Delta 100. So one back is loaded with some, and I have 4 rolls of that as well. So between, I'd have to do a lot of shooting to use all of this film. And I could obviously modify that. If I knew I was doing portraits and I wanted to shoot with a 400 ISO film, I would just bring that as well, or instead, and kind of, as you go. The final things that I keep, I've got spare batteries for everything, the camera, the meters, spare batteries. I have a little level that, my tripod used to have a level on it, but it broke off, so I just use this little level. I bring it, I never use it, but I have this little level. Now the case itself, this is the ThinkTank streetwalker hard drive, which means it has a little back pocket for your computer. But this is about as large as you can go as a carry-on when you fly. And this is, as I said, the ThinkTank. This is a wonderful product. I've had this for years. I don't even know if they still make it, but it's the ThinkTank Streetwalker backpack, and called the Streetwalker hard drive. But it's fantastic. I love it. I've used it all over the world. I keep my Hasselblad stuff in it now, but certainly when I go scuba diving, it's my carry-on. This is my normal carry-on that I take. It's the largest pack that they make that is still undersized for carry-on. So ThinkTank, this is wonderful. Again, I don't know if they still make this, but this is a wonderful backpack. I've had other backpacks. I've had Low Pro. They're good too. There's different brands out there, but you can't go wrong with ThinkTank, in my view. Anyways, that's what I have. I've got a black shirt on and a ton of black gear, so I hope you were able to see it. But this is a system purposely built. So I didn't kind of buy things, arbitrarily. I kind of had a vision for what I wanted, and then I went out and bought all that thing. The very last piece was actually that adapter ring for the 50 mil, the B70 to 77 adapter ring. I bought that off eBay, and most of the stuff I bought off eBay, but I bought that ring off eBay, and then the Canada Post went on strike, and so it took 3 months for me to get that crazy little ring. But anyways, most of the things I bought off eBay, took a couple of months to get it all together. You can also buy great used gear from a website, APUG, apug.org, Analog Photographers User Group. So it's a forum for film users, and sometimes people sell stuff. So I've had very good results buying lenses from there. So I've bought, I think, the 180 and the 120 I bought off of the APUG classified. But the rest I just bought. There's some stores on eBay that I like to use, and they had what I wanted. This stuff is not rare. This stuff is not exclusive. It's not even really expensive anymore. It's expensive enough, but you can get it on eBay. You have to just be careful. You can get it at your local store too. You just have to be careful. It does help to do some research. I should have researched that filter size, but the CFI lenses seem to be the latest version. So again, they're not better, but they're newer. So maybe that makes them better. The cameras, there's different models out there. Certainly, there's a lot of great Hasselblad stuff. It was a huge system for decades and decades, so there's lots of used stuff around. It is expensive, but I'll tell you, that 555 camera now, black one, black's a little overpriced because there's not as many of them, and people who want black, so they're willing to pay $400 more because it's black. I would be in that category because I'm an idiot. But that camera new was probably $5,500. So now you're buying it used for $1,000, maybe $800, maybe $1,200, something in that range. That was like a $5,500 camera new. The lenses, the 40 mil lens that I bought new decades ago, I paid $7,000 for it. So they're used now for like $2,000. It was expensive. $7,000 back then, that would have been 2-3 months total pay. This stuff was super expensive. Now it seems expensive, but really, is it? I don't know. It's $700. Some of the lenses are $500 or $600. They were thousands in the past. It's supply and demand. They're getting older. Be careful, but there's nothing I have found better than the Hasselblad system. There's a lot of choices out there. There's Pentax, there's Mamiya, there's Bernica, lots of choices, but you probably won't go wrong if you stick with the Hasselblad. Just saying, that's what I found anyways. Think of what the system is that you want, do your research, and just buy those pieces that you really want. Don't be making expensive mistakes. And don't make the biggest mistake, which is what I made, selling off gear and then years later buying it back. Would have been a lot easier if I just kept some of that stuff.